She also said on that podium that of the 267 people, the El Salvador prison where they were deported, okay, the only evidence that the White House has shown that they were, quote, in gangs is referencing tattoos, when we know that there are people that have come forward from families of some of those people that have no criminal record, no evidence that they were ever in gangs. And what does Caroline Leavitt say?
Are they Americans? Would anybody deport?
Doesn't matter whether they're Americans.
No, hold on, it does, Brian. It does matter.
So if you're not American,
anybody, no, I have a better question. Forget, American, I'll just take that one level. Was any single person who was deported to El Salvador legally present in the United States? Any one of them?
That is not my argument.
But
if you are illegal,
but it should be, Brian. These people are criminals.
David, hear me out on this.
Sure.
If you are undocumented, even though I disagree with being a nonviolent criminal and being documented, but for argument's sake, okay, no problem. Does that mean that you don't deserve due process and that you should be deported to and sent to one of the highest maximum security prisons in the world with no due process? Just because the White House says that they have tattoos? That's ridiculous.
If a little old lady from Mexico was making tortillas and selling them in her neighborhood and she wasn't causing a problem, I would not suggest she be deported to El Salvador. These people, these MS-13 gang members,
there's no evidence that they don't have.
Yes, there is evidence of it. The fact that you say there's no evidence of it is false. And second of all, these people came to the United States. They took over entire apartment complexes. They were raping and murdering innocent Americans. And Trump said, enough is enough. We're not going to have criminals in the United States illegally here murdering Americans. I'm shipping them the hell out. And that's exactly what it is. And Americans support that, Brian.
So you're
Americans are happy about this, Brian.
When it comes to rapists, yes. But guess what? You can't just say they are. You have to show evidence and prove that the people that you sent to one of the highest maximum.
What should we do?
I'm telling you.
Tell me what we should do instead.
First of all, it's one thing to deport somebody. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about sending people to the highest maximum security prison. And the only evidence, and by the way, the White House hasn't even shown evidence that all those people are rapists or gang members. The only thing they've referenced is some tattoos. Some of those family members have already hired attorneys, and they've shown evidence that these people, some of them are bad people. Some of them are not. And they've shown evidence that some of these people, while undocumented, have no criminal history, and there's no evidence of them being in a gang.
Where are they from?
That's what it doesn't matter where they're from.
No, it does. Where are they from?
It doesn't matter where they're from if there's no evidence that they're in a gang.
You want to talk about due process, right? Where are they from?
It doesn't matter.
Why doesn't the Venezuelan government take them out of the prison and offer them the due process? Why don't they take them back? Because they want them there just as bad as we do, Brian. No, that's the thing. These people aren't orphans. They left one country, snuck into the United States, engaged in criminal behavior here. We kicked them out, and their country isn't coming for them. Why isn't their country rescuing them from that mean old El Salvador jail, Brian?
Let me explain that, and let me explain how our own country works, okay?
Why doesn't their country do something for them?
I will answer that. Okay. But in our country, let's start here, then I'll go there. We have something called due process.
For
hold on,
citizens, not illegal criminals.
You're an attorney, and you know that. And just because somebody is undocumented and we think they might be in a gang does not mean that we send them to the highest maximum security jail in the world.
We do now. So they better think twice before coming here and committing crimes in America.
Well, guess what? Then we have people that do not deserve to be in that prison. And you talk to me about other governments. Guess what? We live in the United States of America. Okay. We give people due process here. I would love everybody in this country to be legal, but just because somebody's illegal and we think they might be in a gang, they might have done some horrible things, which, by the way, there's evidence to the contrary that some of these people have never committed a violent crime in their life. It doesn't mean, David, that we send these people to El Salvador with a bunch of horrible criminals who have done some horrible things. There are people in those jails right now who have never committed a violent crime in their life. They don't deserve to be there, David. And it doesn't matter where they're from. It doesn't matter where they're from.
I'm sorry. I don't agree with you. You know why? Maybe they should think twice about coming into the United States illegally, because that could happen to them. You don't get to sneak into a country just because a country is kind. You don't get to sneak into a country just because a country is just. I'm sorry. You know what? If you want to come to the United States, do it illegally. Claim asylum. These people weren't even here on asylum. They were not even legally here, and yet many of them, if not all of them, were involved in criminal activity. So these people weren't even supposed. They're terrorists.
No,
Brian,
that's not true.
They weren't supposed to be here, and they're terrorizing American citizens.
No, that's not true.
Osama bin Laden walked out of an airplane in New York City, should we have said, look, we would love to do terrible things to you, but instead I'm going to let you go to trial. And if you're found not guilty, we're going to let you walk around in our streets? Hell no. You're a criminal. Okay. Worse, you're an enemy combatant, and you're treated as such, not given the privileges of American justice.
The White House has failed to show evidence that all of these people are violent criminals because they're not. That's factually inaccurate, and that's number one. And there's a fine line difference between somebody who is in this country illegally, who did break the law, who has never committed a violent crime, and then sending somebody to this high maximum security prison and saying, well, we believe that they're rapists, and yes, we believe that they're terrorists. Let me be very clear. All these people are not terrorists. We know that for sure.
All involved with MS-13. They were all involved with MS-13.
No, that's not true. No, that's not true.
What evidence?
That's the problem, David. The White House hasn't presented evidence, and some of these people have had attorneys, their family members, some of them who live in this country, that have given out their name, their age, and given out all the information on their background. Never a violent crime committed. That's the problem.
Why isn't their country, which they're not in anymore for whatever reason, why don't they go and petition El Salvador for their citizen back?
So your standard—
It's a good question, isn't it?
And I'm going to answer it. So your standard in the United States of America is as follows. So we had something called 9/11, and Al-Qaeda, members of Al-Qaeda from Afghanistan and other parts of the world came into this country and committed some horrible acts. And the government there did not want to be involved, or nowhere near as involved as the United States. Do you want to know why? Okay, because not every government works the same way the United States of America works. We have people coming into this country that do horrible things. Then they go back into parts of their country, and their government does not go after them, just like Hamas and Iran. And I could name you probably 100 other examples. We are the United States of America, and our standard and the way we do things here should be very different than the standards of other countries around the world that harbor terrorists. Okay, that's number one. But number two, this is the point that I'm getting at. I'm not talking about terrorists, David. I'm sure some of those people are really bad people. I'm sure that some of those people are part of this gang. I have no problem with them being in that facility. The problem I have, and it goes back to what we've been
you don't care if they are in a gang, if the evidence shows they're in a gang, you don't have a problem with them being deported and sent to that facility without due process?
What I am simply saying, David, is that everybody deserves due process. And if you're going to deport somebody because
what process, though? What due process?
I'm telling you, if it's proven that somebody is illegal and they're deported, even though I might disagree with a nonviolent criminal being deported, it's still legal for them to be deported. Our government has the right to do that. I can disagree with it, but fine. I'm not talking about that.
Okay.
What I'm talking about is sending some of these people who we know were not in gangs, that are not violent criminals. Some, not all, some. They deserve due process and a defense if our government is saying that they raped people, and if our government is saying, well, we're going by a tattoo, when there's evidence that clearly— one guy, I'm going to give you an example.
Sure.
I listened to his mother speak, and I'm forgetting his name at the moment, but there's one guy, a non-violent criminal, okay, who was in this country illegally, who has a tattoo on his arm.
He was in the country illegally.
Okay, yes, but he was one of those people sent to El Salvador. Okay. And the White House specifically talked about his tattoo. Okay, Caroline Leavitt made a brief statement about it. And it was proven by his family members that it was a soccer team tattoo. He was a fan of a soccer team, a non-violent criminal. And then Caroline Leavitt said that it was a clerical error. Well, guess what? If it was a clerical error, then get that guy out of that prison. If you want to, make sure he doesn't come back into this country, that's one thing. But don't lie and say that this guy is a gang member and a violent criminal. That is not due process, and they are lying. The White House is lying to the American people, David.
But you're saying they're lying. Again, you want evidence, and I get that. But you're saying they're lying based on what you believe, not necessarily because we don't have the evidence. And I'll agree with you. It'd be nice to see what evidence they might be relying on, and maybe we'll get it. I don't know. Yep. But the fact remains, right, that if people are illegally in the United States and they're involved in organized criminal activity, whether it be gang or whatever you want to call it, what process do we want to offer them before deporting them? Do we want to release them into the communities where they can commit crime? Do we want to put them in jail? Like what? And this is the problem. When you're in the United States illegally, you've already committed a crime. You've entered our country without going through the legal measures to get here. If you had a right, listen, Brian, we have very liberal asylum laws. We have a lot of people here on asylum, and I'm not talking about people that are legally present in the United States on asylum visas. Now, if you're able to be in this country because we've said, hey, whatever country you're fleeing, you're allowed to come here. We're not talking about those people. We're talking about people who have never even told the government that they're even here. Why are we trying to protect people that are not even, if they had a legitimate reason to be here, they could walk to any single immigration center and say, hey, listen, I'm here illegally, but I'm fleeing crime. I want asylum.
Okay,
they aren't doing that. So what
David,
do we do with
2 points. So 2 points.
Yeah.
First of all, I do find it interesting that when it comes to somebody that's in this country illegally, regardless of whether they're a nonviolent criminal or not, you want the law to be, the standard to be way up here and make sure that people come in here illegally. And if they're not, boom, out of here. Okay. No, doesn't matter.
They're not here legally.
Okay. I understand that. But then when it comes to things that don't fit your narrative, like when it comes to a MAGA Republican or a Donald Trump or somebody that committed horrible crimes on January 6th.
Right, but you want to treat January 6th no problem just like MS-13 people. What evidence do you have?
Here's the difference. Here's the difference.
Sure.
There was evidence proven in a court of law.
Have you looked at that evidence?
Hold on. Let me finish. Then we get that. Every single one of those people had the right to due process, to have an attorney that defended them in a court of law. Some of them pled guilty. Now, you can disagree with it. You could think that they were overpunished. That's fine, but that's a different subject. The point I'm trying to make is every single one of those people, and many of those people were white supremacist terrorists, domestic terrorists.
Based on what evidence?
Based on the evidence that was provided in a court of law, based on video, based on friends' testimony, based on their social media accounts, based on security cameras.
Standards, Brian.
You're using the same standards. No, I'm not. Because the people that were sent to El Salvador that you are claiming are all gang members did not have due process. They were never seen in a court of law. All the people that you are defending, all of them, MAGA supporters, had the right to defend themselves in a court of law. Now, if you don't like the way the courts worked and you think it was unfair and it was politically motivated, you have the right to your opinion. But the point I'm trying to make is these people that are in that jail right now did not have the right to due process. They were not in a courtroom with a defense. And all we've heard is, well, the White House is claiming that they did this, this, and this. Those people that were prosecuted on January 6th had the right to a defense. Many of them pled guilty, and they had the opportunity to defend themselves, and they had attorneys, defense attorneys. How do you not understand that fundamental difference?
Yeah, look, we're talking in circles now. I think the people were not treated fairly on January 6th. I think a lot of people admitted to crimes that they didn't commit because they're worried about.
But they had the chance to defend themselves, whether you agree with it or not.
They didn't have legitimate chances to defend themselves. The same standard you're using.
People in El Salvador did.
Okay,
those people did. Did they have the right to defend themselves?
The same standard that you're relying upon to suggest that some of the MS-13 gang members didn't deserve to go to El Salvador is the same standard I'm applying to the January 6th defendants, because I've had just like you, had personal conversations with the families of some of the people deported. I've had personal conversations with people who were involved in January 6th, and I heard different stories than what has been presented.
You might have heard different stories, but guess what? The stories were heard in a courtroom, and our courts decided that many of those people committed crimes. The people in El Salvador, regardless of what stories you've heard from January 6th, the people in El Salvador, all of them did not have the right to a defense. All of them did not have the right to be in front of a judge. All of them did not have due process.
All of them not legally present in the United States. All of them guilty of crimes just by the very fact that they are here illegally. I don't know why we skip over this fact.
I'm not skipping over it. I said this 10 times. I'll say it again. If you're in this country illegally and you're deported, even though I might disagree with a nonviolent criminal being deported, that's one thing. That's not where my frustration lies. I'll repeat it again. They're in one of the worst jails in the world, and many of these people have not committed violent crimes. And the White House,
why isn't their home country petitioning for them to come back to their home country? I don't understand that.
Because it doesn't work like that.
Why not?
Because Donald Trump had a deal. And if these other countries get involved, the mess that they would be creating by doing it. By the way, in this jail, nobody's sent out. Nobody. Take a look at the history of this jail, because I have.
If an American citizen was, let's say there was an American citizen illegally in Mexico for whatever reason, and the president there decides, you know what, I'm going to take a harsh stance against Americans because I'm mad at them, right? And sends me to El Salvador. Is the American government not going to call the government of El Salvador and say, you have an American citizen there and he hasn't had due process? We would like him back. Would that not happen? We go and negotiate for people that are held illegally in prisons all over the world all the time. We get them from Russia. Russia gets them from us. This happens all the time, prisoner exchanges. Why aren't there countries coming for them if they shouldn't be there? I don't understand that.
I'll tell you why. Because they are in the highest maximum security prison you can find, where literally nobody gets to leave. You can look at the history
of the governments in. So
it is virtually
let's assume they're Venezuelan. So the Venezuelan government can't call El Salvador and say, you have one of our citizens, we want him back. That hasn't happened.
It has happened in the past, but what I am trying to tell you is right now, in the present time, it can't happen.